Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson on pronouns. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, which is English, grade 8. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of pronouns. All right. So pronouns, this is now a continuation of pronouns because as you can see, we quite have a few lessons that we're going to do. So we're going to do like a few more of these lessons, and then in our next session, we are going to also still continue with pronouns, right? So we said our chapter is pronouns. Our subject is English, which is language arts. Grade 8. And the lessons that we are focusing on is to use reflexive pronouns, to use relative pronouns, which is who and whom, and also to use relative pronouns, which is who, whom, which, whose, and that. All right. So once again, this is a continuation of our previous lesson on pronouns. And we're still going to do pronouns next week, on our next session. All right. So when it comes to reflexive pronouns, right, we have singular subject. We have singular subject reflexive pronouns, and then we have plural subject reflexive pronouns, right? So reflexive pronouns are pronouns that either end in self or selves, right? And we said we have singular, um, basically singular subject reflexive pronouns, and we have plural subject reflexive pronouns. When it comes to the subject that is singular reflexive pronouns, it is words like I, myself, you, yourself, she, herself, he, himself, as well as it itself, right? So when I refer to I can then say myself. If I refer to you, I can say yourself. I refer to she, I can say herself. Refer to him, to he, himself, and it being itself. And then we have our plural subject reflexive pronouns, right? And the plural ones, we can say, if I refer to we, right? Then we say ourselves, you, yourselves, and they, which is themselves. And these we call reflexive pronouns, right? They end in self and selves. And a reflexive pronoun is used to refer back to the subject of the sentence or clause in which it appears. It should agree with the subject. So, which means that if I use, for example, either myself, yourself, herself, himself, or itself, it should be referring back to either if I talk about I, then it should refer back to myself. If refer to you, it should refer back to yourself. If I say she, it should refer back to herself, and so on, right? It should not refer to someone else. Once it refers to someone else, then yes, it's a pronoun, but it's a different pronoun, right? But a reflexive pronoun, it refers back to the subject of the sentence or the subject of the clause in which it appears. It should agree with the subject. All right. So, a few examples, right? A few examples of, let's say, reflexive pronouns. We can say, we helped ourselves to some soup. So, we, right, helped ourselves, which means, yeah, they're referring back to themselves. So we helped ourselves to some soup, right? Not to someone else, but they refer to themselves to some soup. So in that case, the subject of the sentence is we, and they use ourselves. After the guests left, Amy made herself a cup of tea. Not someone else, she made herself a cup of tea. So Amy, we can say Amy refers to the subject she, right? So Amy refers to the subject she, and it refers back to herself, right? So Amy refers as the subject, but if we were to, for example, give the pronoun of that subject, it would be she, and she refers back to Amy or to herself. So a reflexive pronoun can only be used to refer to the subject of the sentence or the clause in which it appears, right? So it can only appear back to the subject in which it appears. So to refer to someone else or something else, a personal pronoun like either me, you, him, her, it, us, or them should be used instead. That is not if you refer to someone else. So as soon as someone uses, for example, either the pronoun me, you, him, her, it, us, or them, right? And it means that it becomes a personal pronoun and you're referring to someone else. That is not a reflexive pronoun. And an example of a personal pronoun, right? It's, for example, where we say, first, Jake wrote a note for himself, right? So this one is still Jake wrote a note for himself. This is still a reflexive pronoun, right? Because himself refers back to the subject Jake. But if we say Jake wrote a note for him, then that becomes a personal pronoun because it refers to someone else. So a reflexive pronoun needs to refer back to yourself, or it needs to refer back to the subject in which you are talking about. Whereas a personal pronoun, right, refers to something else or to someone else. So if it does not refer back to you or back to the subject, and then it's called a personal pronoun. And once again, with reflexive pronouns, we use self in the singular setting or in a singular state, and then we use plural subject in the for selves if we refer to it being plural, right? So once again, a reflexive pronoun is used to refer back to the subject of the sentence or clause in which it appears. It should agree with the subject. For example, myself should agree with I. Yourself should agree with you. Herself should agree with she. Himself with he. Itself with it. The same with ourselves needs to refer back to we. Yourselves need to refer back to you, as well as themselves need to refer back to they, because those are reflexive pronoun. As soon as it refers to something else or someone else, and then we call that a personal pronoun, right? All right, so now let's go to our tutorial lesson. Chapter is pronouns, and we're going to the lesson which is to use reflexive pronouns. All right. So you see reflexive pronouns. It either ends in self or it ends in selves. If it's a singular subject, then it ends in self. If it's a plural subject, it ends in selves. Right? And remember we said with the reflexive pronoun, it needs to refer back to the subject, right? Or the clause in which it appears. It should agree with the subject, right? And if it does not refer back to the subject or the clause, right, and it refers to something else or someone else, and then we call that a personal pronoun, right? We call it a personal pronoun. All right. So, for example, yeah, it says, your uncle makes a fool of. We need to refer back to your uncle. Remember, the uncle is him, right? Or he. So if we were to find the pronoun of uncle, it would be he. So which means that we need to find the correct reflexive pronoun that refers back to the subject, which is he. So we can say your uncle makes a fool of himself. Himself every time he gets on the dance floor. Right? So him refers back to uncle, and we can also say uncle is he, right? So he. All right. Did you know that oysters feed? We can refer to oysters being it. So do you know that oysters feed? So we can say itself by extracting algae from the water. So which means that itself, right, refers back to the oysters. And we can say the oysters, the pronoun of the oysters is it, right? So did you know that an oyster feeds itself by extracting algae from the water? So it refers back to oysters itself. And then I wish Aunt Anna would stop worrying about factors that are beyond her control. So now Aunt Anna, we can say it is her, right? Or she. Let's basically say she. I wish she would stop. So we can say Aunt Anna is she. So the pronoun ya for Aunt Anna is she, right? And if we then refer to the reflexive pronoun that needs to refer back to she, then we can say, I wish Aunt Anna would stop worrying herself about factors that are beyond her control. Right? So which means that herself refers back to she, refers back to Aunt Anna. Right? And remember we said a reflexive pronoun needs to refer back to the subject, right? Anna being the subject or she being the pronoun subject. All right. So now we're going to do our test on reflexive pronouns. Remember reflexive pronoun, it needs to refer back to the subject. All right. So we need to complete the sentence with a pronoun that refers back to the subject in bold. Right? It says, I wish Aunt Anna would stop worrying about factors that are beyond her control. Do we say, I wish Aunt Anna would stop worrying she, or stop worrying herself about factors that are beyond her control? So is it she or herself? All right. So we can say, I wish Aunt Anna would stop worrying herself about factors that are beyond her control. So herself, which is a reflexive pronoun. You must all strap. Do we say you must all strap you or yourself in now? The commander announced. It's time to head to the International Space Station. All right. And if we choose the correct reflexive pronoun, we will say, you must all strap yourselves in now. The commander announced it is time to head to the International Space Station. So yourselves is correct. Your uncle makes a fool of, do we say he makes a fool of he, or he makes a fool of himself every time he gets on the dance floor? All right, so we can say our uncle makes a fool of himself, right? Because that is a reflexive pronoun, which is himself. All right, the masquerade. Oh, the masquerade protects itself or its from predators by hiding in a lodge. Oh, muskrat. The muskrat protects itself or its from predators by hiding in a lodge. All right, and we can then say itself. So the muskrat protects itself from predators by hiding in a lodge. So itself it is, right? Because these are reflexive pronouns. And remember we said reflexive pronouns refers back to the subject, right? We have singular subject which ends in self, and we have plural subject which ends in selves, right? Now we're going to use relative pronouns such as who and whom. Relative, it relates to something or someone. And a relative pronoun introduces a relative clause that describes a noun or describes a pronoun. And a relative pronoun, such as who and whom, gives information about people. And to figure out whether to use who or whom, we need to restate the relative clause with a personal pronoun. So if the clause uses a subject pronoun like he, she, or they, then we use who. So if we use the subject pronoun, he, she, or they, then we use who, and it's usually at the beginning of a sentence. But if the clause uses object pronouns such as him, her, or them, then we refer to whom. All right, if we look at an example, we can say the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden. So the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in a garden. So the woman, right, if we refer to the woman as in a specific subject, right, or pronoun, we can say she lives next door. And if we say she, then it means that we refer to it as who. Peter, which is he, or Peter, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. Oh, it says Peter, whom you met yesterday. So I'm referring to him, right? So Peter, whom I met yesterday, has four younger brothers. So we can say that it is him. You met him yesterday. All right. Yeah, it says we need to choose either who or whom, right? I'm planning to house it for the Scots, for them. You met at the community garden reception last spring, right? So if it's referring to the Scots, which is them, then we're going to say that I'm planning to house it for the Scots whom you met at the community garden reception last spring, because we're referring to them. The classic Volkswagen Beetle was originally designed by Austrian engineer Ferdinand Porsche. Adolf Hitler had asked to create a small, economical car for working class German people. So somebody else had asked him to create it. So we can say whom Adolf Hitler had asked to create a small economical car for working class German people. So we say whom. All right. Dr. Marlene Zak or Zook, a professor, studied cricket on the Hawaiian island in Kauai discovered that a mutation in the genes of male Kauai crickets prevents their wings from making a chirping sound. So we can say, since he did himself, we can say who. So Dr. Marlin Zuck, who, a professor who studied crickets on the Hawaiian island of Kauai, discovered that a mutation in the genes of male Kauai crickets prevents their wings from making a chirping sound. All right, so now let's go to our test. So now we're going to the test where we're going to use relative pronouns such as who and whom, right? All right, a boy appears in an 1885 photo of the transcontinental railroad in Canada, inspired author Kenneth Opel to write a fictional account of a young boy's adventures about a train. So we can say a boy who appeared in a photo of the Transcontinental Railroad in Canada, inspired author Kenneth Opel to write a fictional account of a young boy's adventure aboard a train. So we can say who because we're referring to the boy, which is he. Dean Kamen invented a two-wheeled electric vehicle called Segway, founded the first robotics competition for high school students in 1989. So we can say Dean Kamen, who invented a two-wheeled electric vehicle called a Segway. So who? All right, if we look at this one, it says Pearl is back. Do we say Pearl is back who or Pearl is back whom? Wrote The Good Earth, a novel about Chinese peasant life, was raised in China by her American missionary parents. Do we say Pearl is back who or whom? So we're going to say this is Pearl is back who or Pearl is back whom wrote The Good Earth. So we can say Pearl is back who wrote The Good Earth, a novel about Chinese peasant life. Right? The classic Volkswagen Beetle was originally designed by Austrian engineer Ferdinand Porsche. Do we say whom or do we say who Adolf Hitler had asked to create a small economical car for working class German people? Are we going to use who or whom? All right, so we can say whom Adolf Hitler had asked to create a small economical car for working class German people. All right. So now we're going on to also relative pronouns, but we're going to be using words now like who, whom, which we did, but we're going to add whose, which, and that. So we said a relative pronoun introduces a relative clause that describes a noun or a pronoun, right? The five main relative pronouns are words like who, whom, whose, which, and that. And the relative pronoun who and whom, it gives information about people. And to figure out whether to use whom or who, we need to reset the relative clause with a personal pronoun. And if the clause uses a subject pronoun such as he, she, or they, we use who. But if the clause uses an object pronoun such as him, her, or them, then we use whom. And then also a relative pronoun, right, that gives necessary information about things. Necessary information narrows down what you're talking about and it is not set off by just commas, right? For example, we walk to a park that has a tire swing. So in this case, the information narrows down which park we can walk to or we walked to. So which means that it is necessary. And the relative pronoun which adds unnecessary information about things, the extra information does not even narrow down what you're talking about. It's always set off by commas. For example, we walked to Glendale Park, which has a tire swing. All right. So the relative pronoun whose, right? So remember we said who refers to the subject, which is she, he, or they. And then whom refers to someone, it's like it's referring to someone else, right? Which is him, her, or them. So now we can say the like the relative pronoun whose again, it shows position. Whose shows position, right? For example, Emily, whose hair is quite long, likes wearing braids, right? So it shows position, meaning it belongs to Emily, right? Emily's long hair, right? So do not confuse whose with whose, because whose with an apostrophe s, it means who is, right? And that is a contraction, and it does not show position. All right. And if we look at our sentences, it says complete the sentence with the best relative pronoun. It says George Herman Babe Ruth went on to become A record breaking baseball player, right, was born to a poor family in Baltimore in 1895. So, since we are just talking about George, I'm sure it probably just means that we can use who. So, George Herman Who went on to become a record breaking baseball player. So, who? All right. Our local nightly news anchor is Kelsey Yamada, right? My mother used to babysit. So it's referring to someone else, right? So we can say whom my mother used to babysit. All right. So let us quickly go to our test before we end our lesson. All right. So we need to complete the sentence with the best relative pronoun, right? Our local nightly news anchor is Kelsey Yamada. Do we say whom my mother used to babysit? Whose my mother used to babysit? Or which my mother used to babysit? Which one is going to be the correct one? Our local nightly news anchor is Kelsey Yamada, so we can say whom my mother used to babysit. All right. In 1977, science fiction fans lined up to see the film Star Wars. Do we say which made $3 million in the first week of its release, or whose made $3 million in the first week of its release? All right, I think it is which. Yeah, we have two which. So both two whiches is correct. All right, one more. The Petals' coffee table, repurposed from an old door with shelves and drawers from a discarded desk, was built by Mr. Petal. Do we say whose handy skills are evident throughout the home, or who has, or which? Let's say whose handy skills are evident throughout their home. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on pronouns. Right, we spoke about reflexive pronouns, and we said reflexive pronouns, it ends in self, which is singular, or selves, which is plural, right? And with reflexive pronouns, the pronoun needs to refer back to the subject, right? Then we have relative pronouns, which is who, whom, whose, which, and that, right? The relative pronoun who refers to she, he, or them. They, them, and then whom refers to when we are referring to someone else. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on pronouns. In our next lesson, we are going to continue with pronouns, compound subjects, and object subjects, right? We're going to continue. But for now, you should have a good evening further. Thank you for joining the class. Goodbye.